Welcome to the Researching Greatness podcast, where we delve into the fascinating backgrounds of individuals in technology, government, and other relevant industries. Here with co-hosts Brian and Joe, I'm John, and our guest of the day, who we should all be pretty excited for, was Mr. Nick Chaillan, serial entrepreneur. Started his first company at 16, came over to the United States, had an amazing experience. What we have this podcast broken out into is sort of three parts. We're going to hit on those a little bit today, sort of his background, where he came into the Department of Defense, and then what he's doing now going into the future. So Brian, over to you to talk a little bit about his involvement in the Department of Defense.
Yeah, we got to talk to him. A really interesting story of how he first got involved with DHS, ultimately moving up into the Air Force, becoming the CSO. Got to dive into a little bit of the different programs and things that he implemented while he was there, and then ultimately his disillusion with the organization as a whole and what ultimately led him to quit, which is quite interesting. And then over to Joe.
Yeah, so now he is the founder of Ask Sage. And Ask Sage is a chatbot, so it's taking advantage of generative AI, this new wave of generative AI. And it has a number of plugins that allows you to ingest data and do really interesting things that I think the DoD should certainly take advantage of. And we get into that with him as far as his involvement in that and where that's going. And back to you, John.
Yeah, so Nick Chaillan, get to him shortly here. In the interim, please hit the subscribe button. We hope you'll enjoy the conversation with Nick. Check out our follow-up episode too after this, which we'll be posting in about a week. We're going to dive a little deeper into the conversation with Nick. We'll give some follow-up to the points he gives in the episode. If anybody in our audience has questions or comments, feel free to post them on the episode here. We'll take a look at all those comments. We'll address them in our follow-up episode, and really look forward to engaging with Nick here in this episode. So stay tuned. Just you and I have met a couple times. You probably don't know Joe and Brian. I was going to let them just introduce themselves to you real quick, since it's the first time you're meeting them. And you want to kick it off, Brian, there?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Brian Knobs. I'm a CTO of a company here in Northern Virginia called Red Lattice, where we do offensive cyber.
I know you guys.
Around this area. Oh, okay.
Very
so
nice.
then, yeah, been doing that for past decade and been in the IC kind of industry for many years before that.
Nice.
Joe?
Joe Dean. It's wonderful to meet you. I was in the Navy for 12 years, enlisted and officer, and then ended up becoming a cyber warfare engineer. If you know what that is, it's a Navy thing.
Sure.
Did a lot of development, a lot of cyber things, and then got out. Started to be a DoD contractor. Worked for a place called Black Horse, if you heard of that, and then that became Parsons. And now I am alone and not afraid, and trying to do a startup.
That's the best way.
Yeah, trying at least. So working with generative AI, like you. So I'm like super excited to talk to you.
Awesome.
And trying to see where that goes, but more. No, not. I mean, not in the way that you are. More of like niche military application, that kind of thing.
Very cool. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess we'll break here, and I'll kick off the podcast. And first question for you, Nick, is a question I'm going to ask you to really expand on, talk a little bit about yourself, your current company, what that is, while answering this question. And so the question is, what is the most important lesson that you have ever learned in life? And if you can talk a little bit about how that got shaped and where that's led you today.
That's an interesting one. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is not to listen to people. Everybody is trying to fit people in boxes and try to see what's usual, what's common, what's crazy, what's not crazy. The fact that a guy like me, born in France, ends up, the first chief software officer in the Air Force Space Force DoD at the Pentagon would probably, be impossible if you, believe that those kind of boxes, right? And so I never really pay attention to that. I created my first company back in France. I was 15. I'm 39 now. So I was also part of the youngest SES, if not the youngest. I don't know. I don't care. But pretty young for sure in the Pentagon. So same thing when I had, dozens of people when I was 16. If you listen to people, that's not something you should be doing. Particularly back then in France, that wasn't common like we have now. Entrepreneurs creating companies very early on. That was not a thing back then. And so, don't listen to people that think they know better. Often they're the same people that don't do much. And so that's going to be my answer for you.
That is
Nice.
really powerful.
So would you say that starting off that early and have been doing it for so long, has failure been a big part of your journey?
Well, I may have gotten lucky a little bit. I don't know if I've failed in a big way. What I'm very good at is failing small incrementally and embracing agile. And so if you do that, right, you're gonna have small failures, but you're not gonna completely implode and waste a bunch of money and time. And so I think that's part of the key. Part of my success is to get rapid, iterative feedback from the end user to make sure you're not wasting a bunch of time and money. And so when you can do that at scale, then you can really prevent the kind of implosion that you could see with some of the big engagements we see happening, particularly in DoD.
Any specific examples there where maybe a small failure actually led you to a big breakthrough or something really successful that came out of failing forward?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you always get to different paths in life. Often you don't understand the ripple effect of the butterfly effect. And so you may think at first, oh, that's a negative thing, that something just happened. But that's also how you learn, right? And that's also how you change and how you become who you are. So I don't have a specific example that comes to mind, but really, I think it's probably because it's all small things that compound. But the fact is, if you look at, I don't know, it could be something as stupid as my second marriage didn't work out and I got a divorce twice. So I'm married again to an American now. But look, if I was still married with the second or the first French girl, then I would not have been able to move here as fast and become a U.S. citizen, and then I would not have been able to get into the U.S. government. So the ripple effect of that alone could be tremendous. And so you never know. So that's interesting.
It is interesting. It's interesting how you can't know how those failures or how those steps along the path, right? Because it's all just learning experiences.
Yeah.
More than just looking at
defines you
failures.
as a person, right? So how do you learn and how do you bounce from it and how do you embrace the change? And particularly in IT, the velocity of IT is such now that you used to be able to get away with stuff, every 20 years, every 10 years, whatever cycles. But now it's like every year, every 6 months, you have to reinvent yourself. And I remember, maybe back 20 years ago, I did an interview with a developer that was like, oh, I don't have a laptop at home. I was like, well, what do you mean?
Right.
Like, yeah, just use that at work, but I don't. So I'm like, how deep, what, and so that just the
Yeah.
guy was just, excited about, the money aspect, but he wasn't too passionate. And I would argue a guy like this now has no chance of success, right? Because he wouldn't have the passion to invest in reinventing himself or herself to keep up with the pace of IT, in which case you have no chance of being relevant and succeeding. And so I think you go back to your passion and why I've been able to work so hard and do so much in, from the get-go is if you're passionate, it's not really working, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and that's become one of my core interview questions. Is what does your home network look like? What is your But I imagine that really comes back to if I was interviewing you for a job, I'd be like, wow, you've started all these companies. Like at 15, like what made you start that company?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I always wanted to build stuff and I don't know why, but I was always driven. I sold my first game. I was 12 and I got 50K at the time, and that
Wow.
50K was used to create my first company at 15. So I already self-funded, my entire journey here. and grew to 450 people in 12 countries. So I had people in Dubai, Latin America, 7 countries in Europe, and then US and Canada. So I got to see all the difference in culture, and it's just interesting how, I guess, when you're solving problems and you're passionate, at some point you want to make it a business so you can make some money.
Yeah.
It's not just fun, and you also have to pay the bills, I guess. And so I had my own apartment. I was 16, and I don't know, just a different
Wow.
life.
That
So
is a very
you
different setup.
you mentioned generative A. You mentioned excuse me. You mentioned not having a laptop at home. Do you think generative AI is the new not having a laptop at home? Like if you don't play with ChatGPT, then you're probably not relevant at this time, or Ask Sage, for example.
Yeah, I think you cannot, if you're not using generative AI today, you have no chance of being relevant, and you also will be. My bet is that generative AI is going to take probably 80% of the non-blue collar jobs, and so we made fun for so many years about plumbers and electricians, and now we're out of them, and we desperately need them.
That's
I
so
can tell you
true.
those jobs are more safe and also probably make better money if you know what you're doing than many non-blue collar jobs. And so my take is 80% within 5 to 10 years of the non-blue collar jobs will be replaced by AI. Some will be new jobs. The question also is it going to be the same people doing the old job and the new jobs? Probably not. I don't know. But the fact is, I think it's going to be way more painful and massive as any technology innovation in history. People compare with automation in automotive. It's completely bogus, right? Because the barrier to entry of automation capabilities in automotive is very high, with the cost, at 250K a pop,
Right.
for each machine, compared to a $30, plan on generative AI to get access to the platform, and then augment your velocity. What we see on average between 20 to 35x. So I don't know how you compete if someone can move 35 times faster than you do. I know
Hmm.
I know I can't.
Hmm.
And so even if you're a genius, 35x velocity, you cannot even grasp with the compounded effect of it along the axis of time. So
Yeah. And that's what you're passionate about right now is generative AI. Is that fair to say? And if
yeah.
so, how did that occur? Give me the path to that.
Well, so when I left the Air Force 2 years ago, after putting Kubernetes on jets and bombers and space systems and even nuclear systems, um, you know, there's not a lot of exciting stuff left to do. I'm gonna do some boring mobile app, about, I don't know. So it took me a good year to find something exciting enough. I was on the board of a few company, whatever, helping people, but honestly, um, bored to death, But ChatGPT came out, and like everybody, I played with it at first, and then, okay, that's pretty cool. But then I started to realize kind of the real mission impact. And at first I looked at it, with a warfighter DoD use case, and quite honestly, very rapidly we realized, wow, this is just a game changer. And I started to look at coding and look at every use case, right? Intelligence, acquisition, contracting,
Hmm.
legal. I mean, it's a company as a service tool when you know how to orchestrate it, and that's what you become.
Mhm.
You become the orchestrator of that tool to have a chief of staff slash development team slash compliance team, whatever, right? Legal team. You have everything at your fingertip. There's pros and cons and issues to be solved, but so many people, people disappoint me nowadays, where people just see all the negative stuff nowadays. They don't see the good
Hmm.
stuff, and they focus on the bad stuff and give up, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to build a company to solve these, few issues, and take the 90% of good stuff and make it perfect, which we did. And so bring, we bring the security aspect of it to solve the privacy IP and cybersecurity component of it. We bring the agnosticism, so we're agnostic to the LLM, so we're not getting too locked into OpenAI, Google, whatever. So having diversity of options, right? And then we bring the extensibility to add features and capabilities to automate, with agents, but with built-in security. It's funny how AI teams, just like Kubernetes did at the beginning, always forget. It's like all innovations forget about the basics of life, and all the lessons learned we learned along the way, of like basic cyber 101 stuff, basic business 101 stuff, not getting locked in, diversity, abstraction. But instead people go back and, oh, I'm getting locked in again. Oh, I forgot about cyber. I'm going to bolt it on instead of baked it in. All that stuff is very common for any new innovation. Somehow we're not learning and making the same mistakes again and again. So we wanted to bring a generative AI platform that could actually do all that and help teams accelerate outcomes instead of building the scaffolding to be able to get the stuff done.
Yeah, and you're hitting on so many questions
so many
that we
things.
had.
So I want to just jump in like really quickly to something that I have a question about Ask Sage, that that it's at the forefront of my brain when I read your posts, because I'm constantly following you. You're fascinating on LinkedIn, by the way.
I have one follower. I'm very happy. You got one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So models, and how you generalize. I understand backend wise and interface wise how you would generalize API calls and cloud-based generative AI versus internally hosted generative AI. But models are so different. So if you're querying, let's say, and you're trying to generate a Postgres query, how do you plan to distinguish between GPT-4, which can do that, no question, to Llama 7 billion, or if you can't use Llama, which we can get into later, or like Mistral, right, 7 billion. How do you plan to distinguish between those two and still have your ecosystem work?
You can't, and that's the problem, right? That's the biggest issue you see when you start talking about abstraction today. But my take is the open source models are going to catch up, and soon enough it's not going to be that big of an issue. Although the commercial models are always going to be ahead, and they're going to have use cases that the open source models then will not be able to do, with other examples of use cases that we don't even think about yet. Like you see with GPT-4V, that's going to bring image detection and all that good stuff. That will become okay. Well, then you can do that with Llama 2 on premise, air gapped, and yeah,
Right.
Which is, by the way, why the department needs to wake up and start realizing that government clouds is not going to be the answer. You cannot keep parity of features between government cloud and commercial clouds. In fact, when you look at Azure commercial, which is now FedRAMP High, right? And so Azure OpenAI is on the FedRAMP High commercial fabric, not the government fabric. And it costs $150 million to host OpenAI. They're not going to bring it on the Gov Fabric anytime soon, or the secret and top secret fabric. So the question is going to be, how do you start consuming that stuff and find innovative ways to start doing it securely, instead of keeping this notion of air-gapped, parameter-defined security models that don't work and don't follow the zero trust principles that we have today, and start embracing real zero trust, which if you believe in it, then you have to believe in it everywhere. And it's so funny how the compliance landscape of DoD is completely broken, right? If you look at CUI, if you put it on premise as a contractor, right, you have to deal with CMMC, but it's self-attesting right now, so you get away with murder. So you can host the SharePoint stuff, right, with a bunch of CUIs, millions of files of CUI on SharePoint on premise. Then you put it on the cloud, and like, whoa, it has to be FedRAMP High, it has to do all the other stuff, but you don't have to do that on premise, right? And then if the government does it instead of contractor, it's not even the same controls, right? It just makes whoever designed this makes not only is not even good at compliance, paperweight compliance, right? Because effectively CMMC uses 800, 171, 172, and some made up controls. And then, you have FedRAMP High that's using NIST 853, and you have CMMC, right? And then on premise, like, oh, okay, you're just going to do your own, nonsense. But if we're data-centric and we're trying to protect data, then shouldn't it be the same stack, right? And so why does it matter? Why do I need to have a cloud access point, when I'm on the cloud? But why don't I need it if I'm hosting the same data on my premises? How does that make any sense, right? And why are you creating this parameter-based obsolete concepts, and only when it's on the cloud? Like, if you're data-centric, why do you have controls that are not applicable for the same data based on where it's hosted? How does that make sense? It doesn't.
Does a lot of that stem from DISA and their role? And I look back when cloud was starting, and I happened to be at
Yeah,
DISA when we were going through the original stuff. And DISA was so anti-commercial cloud because they were competing with the commercial
right.
clouds because they had
Let's
all
let's
the DISA
let's
data
create bottlenecks
centers.
to make sure they don't succeed. That's right.
Exactly. So it was all DISA, and I'm not going to, at the agency level, not individuals per se. There were some individuals
Sure.
there, but they were undermining the commercial cloud and doing everything
Yeah.
they could to roadblock the commercial cloud for over a decade, and actively sabotaging it to support their mil cloud endeavors
Not
and all
cloud.
their
Yeah.
DISA decks. Is that still what's driving a lot of these issues? Is this um, competitive
I think
nature with
there's
these
three
DoD
three
data
things, right?
centers?
There's that for sure, right? There's definitely the competition aspect, which should not be the case. Number one. Number two, I think there's a piece of fear of cloud still, right? And so they don't understand
Mm-hmm.
it, so they're gonna just put more security. And three, I think there's the notion of still not grasping zero trust and embracing perimeter defense and creating these massive bottlenecks of access point, which really makes no sense. If they were cloud native, like we did, I actually built the first and largest zero trust stack in DoD with a cloud native access point, which effectively brought the access point to be cloud native and not have to VPN to Nipper to access these enclaves, which really is the way it should be. Right? It's not rocket science. And even that, they failed to embrace it when we made it up, when we made it and made it available to everybody to use. Even when teams at DISA were excited in DevSecOps and wanted to use Platform One and what we built there, the DISA leadership was always trying to, the middle tier leadership, not the top leadership, the middle tier, frozen middle, as we call it, was always trying to stop them from using it.
You hit on zero trust. I know that's a really hot topic here in the DoD. Would love to
Now,
get, given we have a mixed audience here of DoD commercial and others, like in your perspective, what is zero trust and what are some of those challenges that you see in not so much implementing, but how people understand what zero trust is and the misunderstandings that are happening across
yeah,
DoD?
it kind of cracks me up, right? Because, when I started at DHS first before DoD, and I was the first guy, right, to bring zero trust in the government with Google back then. And, we created an architecture that would enable that bypass of the tick and cap and all that. And for me, zero trust is really became bloated and completely, now it's equal to cybersecurity if you listen to some people. For me, zero trust has really kind of three pillars, right? One is data centricity, so you can label data down to the cell level and be able to track who gets access to what and when. Two is kind of strong identity, right? So knowing the user identity or the NP robot identity using MFA, and three is a device enforcement, comply to connect, as DoD loves to call it. So the device state, and you can compare that to the risk, and compounding the user identity with the device risk is how you get whitelisted access to resources based on your need to know and least privilege enforcement and policy enforcement point. And so that is zero trust. The rest is bloated stuff around it, that people keep adding to make it now what is an equivalent to cyber as a whole. So I don't know what's the difference between cyber and zero trust. Now, if you listen to some people, it's like everything, and that shouldn't be the case. And so that's what zero trust is. We built the largest zero trust implementation in DoD with the cloud native access point and platform one, really at scale across all fabric. And then, it's funny to me how the people that fought me preventing us or trying to slow us down to deploy the CNAP at DISA, which in the same meetings were telling me, hey, I heard about this zero trust thing, but I went to a conference and I don't really know if I believe in it. That was already like 5 years in zero trust from the commercial side standpoint. So that was like 2019, right? Those same people became program manager of zero trust at DISA, right? Which is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
So the fact that we keep putting people with zero experience in some jobs just because of ranks or whatever the driver is just wrong. And so when I staffed, my teams in the Air Force and Space Force, I always looked at experience over ranks. And so I had enlisted running very complex programs because I couldn't care less about their ranks. So that always created some issues, I guess.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a right turn here because we want to ask this question. All of us were kind of looking at your background and wondering, how did a French dude get involved in the DoD? So could you kind of go into that and don't be shy. Tell us the whole story. Yeah.
Well, first, that's the proof that you shouldn't, try to fit people in boxes. Number
100%.
one. Number two, competence. I think the right people wanted to make a difference, and that started with Dr. Duchak at ANS, who appointed me to become the first special advisor for cyber and DevSecOps. And so at ANS for Miss Lord, I became at the time the DevSecOps guy, which most people didn't know what a container was. In fact, when I started talking about containers with the DoD CIO shop at the time, they thought I was trying to ship containers to Afghanistan.
Yes.
It was a shipping container, not a software container. And so that was the beginning of my first meeting, if you want to laugh, in the DoD was this agile study where I enter a room where you have at least 40 people sitting around, 2 rows of a conference table.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear, a lot of babbling about agile and why it should be the way to do business. And I'm like, yeah, great. That's 22 years old. Thank you. But I keep hearing stuff, and I could tell pretty rapidly that people just were saying,
Buzzwords.
Basic sentences with no understanding of agile. And so I stopped everybody. I said, hey, just a simple question here. How many of you actually have used agile in real life? And out of 40 people, like 2 people, me and somebody else, raised their hands. And I was like, so why are you here? Like, why do we do this room? And why are we wasting the taxpayer money with so many people? That was my first meeting in the Pentagon, so I did not make a lot of friends.
Did you literally say, why are you here? Because if there was only a recording of that.
I did. And a lot of these people ended up, they're good people. They're great people. In fact, I ended up working with most of them after, despite them hating me or not liking me as much after that nice sentence that I said. But the fact is, I think they understand that deep down I was right? I think no one can doubt it. It's just that no one would say it, right? Doesn't make it wrong. And so I was a little bit always too blunt, and that's part of who I am. That's okay. But I also tell people, if you're liked by 100% of the people, you're not doing your job, right? So my goal was 70%, right? I ended up close to 60% of people liking me, and that's okay. I would rather that than being closer to 100%. Because if you really want a change agent, I love people that say, I want a change agent, but I don't want to make noise. Well, maybe you don't want a change agent, right? So
that's fair. Yeah, so how did they find you to recruit you in the first place? Was it a company that you were running?
No.
Really?
LinkedIn.
My life has been driven through LinkedIn, at least a good chunk of it. And I'm a machine on LinkedIn, and people that don't invest on LinkedIn, that's why I couldn't believe all these DoD people that didn't have LinkedIn accounts. I'm like, how do you even exist? How do you do stuff? But again, they didn't do much on the commercial side, right? And so for me, I sold 3 companies through LinkedIn. I started at DHS. The month after I became a U.S. citizen, I was at DHS. Also, as a chief architect. And so that was through LinkedIn. And then when I left DHS, I sold my 12th company to Qualys, where I became the federal CTO. And, I went to talk to, I wanted to make a difference, and I thought DHS was not too exciting. And so I said, after 18 months at DHS, I wanted to try DoD. And so reach out to people on LinkedIn, and that's how I got it. Yeah.
Nice. So modern day networking, I guess, just use the virtual social network.
Yep. I mean, the same way I found my wives.
On LinkedIn? I'm
on
sorry.
LinkedIn.
Not
That might be
LinkedIn,
the
but
story.
online dating.
No, it's a hot take.
Not that-
LinkedIn is the
not
new, yeah,
online
new
dating. But yeah,
matchmaker. Yeah.
Online dating. Okay, that makes more sense. John, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask what brought you here to the United States, and
yeah,
why'd you
I
leave
had a
France?
company that I still have actually, after Mouse, which was building touch tables with Microsoft, and so we had 12 countries, and I had an office in New York, and I loved it. And I was tired of France, where always vacations, people complaining, oh, I have a pimple on my hand, I'm going to take 2 weeks off because I can't type on the computer because I have a pimple. I've seen it all the nonsense. I actually asked, good 100 plus, maybe 200 people if they wanted to move to the US. And guess how many said they wanted to come with me to New York out of 200? Guess how many?
Oh, you wanted to guess? 5. Oh, wow.
Zero.
Oh,
0.
Because France gives 3-year unemployment when you have a company moving to another nation. So they give the employees 3 year unemployment with almost your full salary, pretty much. And so most of these guys were 20 something and waited 2.5 years before even looking for a job again. That's the mentality we create with all this socialist assistance that is so toxic and destroying the nation. And so that was my driver from one, moving, and also the 75% taxes I was tired of paying. And so we complain about taxes here. You should go spend some time in France. And
Sure.
then that plus the complacency, and then I realized DoD was even more complacent than France. So I don't know.
Oh no!
So it's a
Wow.
question for you of like, okay, you've been on both sides of that pendulum. Do you think the U.S. is in some ways too far to the other side of the work, like life is work, or has it been a good balance?
Go to China, you'll see the difference. I think we're
Well,
pretty good. I
there's
think we're in
true.
the middle. There's always more left than you think. It's pretty extreme, particularly when vacation was insane. I remember when I moved and I was like, France gets like 2 months vacation, bunch of holidays and freaking everything.
It's like a year maternity leave, right? Like,
yeah, maybe not a year, but yeah, it's pretty insane.
I think everyone is forgetting how good the cheese is there, though.
That's
you
right.
know, you
But
gotta.
I can import it, so I do just
yeah, that's
that.
what shipping's for. Yeah.
That's
Shipping,
true.
yeah.
That's very
That's
true.
what I do. Go to mauriescheese.com and you buy your cheese. I have no
Hot take,
equity in
Murray'sCheese.com.
no equity on the company. Just saying. If you want to try good French cheese, go there. I spend
There you
way
go.
too much money. Way too much money there. They should give me some equity, but no. So yeah, I think it's. I mean, sure, it's a little bit extreme, right, compared to France, but it's way less than other nations, and I think it's overall pretty healthy.
Nice.
I have a question about. I'm going to again take a right turn. I feel like there are a lot of right turns here. But generative AI, I want to ask about where you think innovation is happening in generative AI right now, or the most innovation is happening.
Well, it started and the maturity is evolving, right? And we keep moving that wall of what we thought was the limitation of the technology, right? People complaining about lack of being factual, and then they were complaining about, the stuck in time training and all that. So now, we're connecting, like you said, real time data, uh, tapping into databases and data lakes. We built agents, with decision trees, with either human assisted or completely automated tasks. If you look at, I mean, I would probably argue that the most advanced, and maybe I'm biased, but that's okay. The most advanced generative AI you use is here at our stage. If you look at our backlog, for example, so 90% of our code is written by the bot, right? So when you create a user story on a backlog, the bot is going to go pull it and pull our Git repo and see which microservices and which part of our code base is going to be impacted by the new user story, and write about 90% of the code out of the box. And then it depends. Sometimes it's 80, sometimes it's 100. Depends on the feature, but still very good. And then the human is going to go and do the delta and then push your CI/CD pipelines, and that's how we with just me as a developer. I'm the only developer of Ask Sage, by the way, a
Wow.
human developer. 90% of the code is written by the bot. And that's how we get the velocity of probably a team of 50 people, you know.
So
So
so when you do that, when you go back and forth with this, so quite, I want to go back and just say like that's quite a claim as far as like Ask Sage is the you know that it's the most advanced generative, you know that. Um,
consumer of generative AI, not builder.
Sure,
Consumer.
right? Because my guess is that the
Fair.
code that you're building is actually from GPT-4 API calls. Is that valid? Yeah.
Yes.
So do you with your code, and given that ChatGPT, I have not tried Ask Sage, so I'm not going to say that Ask Sage is not the
I'm
most.
disappointed
I
in
know.
you so
I'm
much.
sorry. But ChatGPT is extremely advanced,
Yep.
and it uses a panel of experts, as far as we know, right? That's the word on the
Yep.
street.
Hmm.
And it also has a pretty big leg up as far as cutting edge technology and integrating this into a chat interface. So
Yep.
are you saying that Ask Sage is better than ChatGPT, or are you saying it's a different product?
I think we're better than ChatGPT, but that was not what I was saying first. What I was saying is we are the best consumer of generative AI to build outcomes. And so,
Hmm.
as us as a company, right, the way we use generative AI to automate entire tasks, like for example, my
Mhm.
entire ATO package and Fahrenheit and GDPR package was created by the bot with 96% accuracy, right? All the stuff we do from our logo to, as a company, right, was created by the bot at a velocity that's unequaled by humans. And suddenly, most companies are not embracing generative AI across the enterprise. Even a company like OpenAI would argue because they're so much bigger and it's such a massive organization now, they probably don't embrace generative AI itself inside of every piece of the business as much as we do. Doesn't mean Stage is a better product. It just means we have the better implementation of generative AI to build the company out of it.
So so let's dig into that, because I think one of the things that is coming out frequently, right? You get weekly alerts. You probably see these, I do as well, on, what's the most recent, what's the best strategy of organizing LLM bots or LLM agents. So there's AutoGen, there are a whole bunch of them. So
Yep.
when you create that for Ask Sage, how do you keep up with integrating the new hotness, right? The new technology that's going to completely change the next step in what you do. I'll mention, you mentioned GPT-4V, and there's a GPT-4V that automates browser interaction with the now. So I mean, just trying to integrate this is a task in and of itself. How do you keep up with that?
Yeah, and there's two aspects that people forget, right? I think there's a security that's often forgotten, right? Particularly by AI teams. If you look at AutoGPT, for example, when it came out, right, or even LangChain, right, the
Mhm.
security is still pretty much non-existent, and it's
Yeah.
despicable. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
zero security. We couldn't use it. We already had started to build it. In fact, same concept before they even came out. But the fact is, there's from us when we start bringing stuff to the enterprise, whether it's government or commercial enterprises, we have baked in security and not bolted on. And so I think that's number one. And you're going to have some delays compared to all these products coming out with zero security for sure. But I think that's not going to scale, and that's going to be a massive tech debt. So maybe the idea is not always to be like, at the same day release cycle of all the nonsense coming out of industry. You want to keep up. You don't want to be 20 years behind either, but you also want to see what sticks, right? You want to try to see what gets momentum. If you just try to do everything, probably 90% ends up dying within 2 weeks, right? So
Right.
sometimes giving it
Right.
just a week or two, that helps clear the landscape, right? And then
Right.
of
Sure.
course it's automation, right? Removing human and automating. So same concept with all features of building backlogs. We can give an API documentation or library documentation, and we can have the bot generate integrations into Ask Sage code base and do a merge request for me to review out of the box. And so all that velocity, all that automation, all the time we spent to embrace generative AI into our processes and DevSecOps is now how we get to move much faster than most teams. Now, I'm sure some others are doing similar things, and that's fine. But because we're small and nimble, we can do way faster than some larger enterprises. And we're gonna see traction based on demand and see what our customers are asking. And because we have so many enterprises now, we have 1,700 companies and 8,500 government teams after 6 months on the platform. We in 27 agencies using Sage. We get to see pretty much the demand. Although customers are at least 6 months behind what we do here at Sage with our own product, right? So we're always leading the pack. And so funny enough, when we feel the pain, we proactively fix that. And so we're always ahead of the curve when you compare to most customer adoption and their maturity in generative AI. So it's and that's kind of maybe some of my gifts as a human. I was always very good at trying to see what's going to stick and what's going to be a snowflake and pick from that and scale. And that's a skill you can't describe. It's a gift. You have it or you don't have it. I don't know. You can acquire that. It's kind of a same thing as picking stocks or investing or whatever. At some point, there's some mathematical rule, but there's also some gut feeling, and I just have a good gut feeling. I guess I don't know.
Gotcha. So a little bit on what sticks there. Where's Ask Sage going in the future, and in the world of AI, what do you see sticking around? Where's the world going? What's your vision? How do you see it applied?
Yeah. So I don't really see us as a competitor to ChatGPT and all these tools, right? Because we want to be agnostic to the LLM and most of these tools, and same thing for the Microsoft of the world or the Google, right? They want you locked into the LLMs and not going to be bringing diversity. There's a few companies that will try to do that, but they often have a price point that's pretty egregious, right? Compared to our model, which has a free tier, and then $30, $50, $90 price point. So one is what Gartner calls now the generative AI platform, right? And for us, we had security and agnosticism and of course extensibility to that, to be able to bring customizations, integrations, APIs, all that good stuff, agents, but do it with the baked-in security and zero trust throughout the life cycle. I think very few companies in AI have a grasp of cyber. It's scary, actually, when you look at the CVs of some of these open source projects, and I've been helping a lot of companies. You look at great companies like Unstructured, which we use at Sage to do, all the file ingest, PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, whatever. They had so many CVs at first, no one could use it in production. We helped them fix that, with ChainGuard and all that. And so now we have great capability. So we give back also to upstream and guide people on how to do that. And we've done that, with many products like Weaviate for vector database, and we built a LBAC, stack on top of vector data to be able to control need to know and least privilege. So a lot of stuff we had to do to make this enterprise ready, and people gloss over that stuff and have no understanding of it. And I think that's going to be foundational. So it's like building a house on a shitty foundation. That's probably not a good idea. And so we did the opposite, right? And it's like I said, people seem to forget lessons learned. It's like, okay, you got locked into a cloud provider, you're gonna make the same mistake with Gen AI, right? So it's like, when are you gonna learn? And so we're trying to bring a stack that's from day one, not opinionated, right? We're not the Red Hat of Kubernetes, right? We're kind of the rancher, right? So we're trying to bring diversity of option and flexibility and security baked in without too much opinionated stack, right? So it's the right balance. It's tough, but the key is to see how much you accelerate the journey of the customer to get to outcomes instead of building the scaffolding to get to the outcome, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you're spending a lot of time helping other companies try and figure out their security posture and everything else. It's been about 2.5 years, I think, since you were CSO of the Air Force and Space Force. 3 years now. So how is that a kind of experience, and is that how is that influencing how you interact with these new companies?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me was realizing how much TV shows are bullshit. You watch NCIS, you watch all these TV shows, and they just you look at all these technical advances and innovation, and then you go back to the dark ages in real life, and so I was shocked to see how poor of IT systems compared to how much money we spend and what kind of uh, very poor quality tools we're giving to the warfighters and everybody. So it's just very scary
Hmm.
to see kind of the complacency and kind of incompetence really of the teams when it comes to bringing basic IT concepts, whether it's cloud. DoD was at least 10 years behind the IC. Um, you look at the data centricity stack of the IC, at least 10, 15 years ahead of DoD, right? So I think that the IC is doing very well. The DoD is a disaster, right? And little silos and fiefdom and kingdom and lack of flexibility and diversity of options, and it's just very scary. And so I was pretty shocked. And when I started DoD, I had no kids, and then I left. I had three kids because I had twins. So
Oh wow.
and so I went from 0 to 3 in 3 years, and that changed my perspective on my anxiety level of like, hey, we're not going to be able to compete against China, to, hey, my kids, because of your incompetence and stupidity, are not gonna be able to compete against China, and are gonna end up, speaking Chinese in 20 years, and you
Right.
need to wake up before it's too late. And kind of the complacency was getting more personal and
Mhm.
painful to me, and to the point where I was losing sleep. And particularly when you start seeing some of the classified stuff I would see, and some of the most important programs of DoD on the SAP side. And so that was just scary, and I think that kind of woke me up on the importance of the commercial sector to engage with DoD. And when I hear companies like Meta, right, with Llama 2 have a clause on there that says war fighting use cases are banned from the use of the LLM.
Hmm.
Those socialists, really, because that's what they are benefiting from warfighter sacrifices to defend themselves and their family, but they can't give back to DoD for what reason? And
Right.
it's just
They're happy
despicable.
to use GPS, but not happy to give back to,
Right. And it's just,
yeah.
China does not have that problem, right?
Yep.
And so we're still fighting on getting generative AI accredited on CUI, and meanwhile, Beidou GPT is across all fabric in the CCP. And if you have the same velocity increase, right, let's say 20, 25, 30x, how do you compete against China when they already have more people? There's less complacency. They have the advantage, whether we like it or not, of being a communist nation where people do what they're told, and they share with the party every IP, every data that they have. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying it's an advantage to have that, whether we like it
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
it's just scary, and we how do we compete?
Yeah, so that's a great lead into you recently posted about llama and as you said their fair usage statement
Yeah,
about military purposes. And yeah, I agree. China will just barrel through that.
take it.
So yeah, so they probably are.
They already
So
did. I promise you, they already have it.
yeah.
I don't need to
So
think twice.
yeah. So what? Give me the lay out the argument for using I can't remember the Defense Act, the Defense Production Act, to either co-opt or utilize that IP. And
Yep.
I did note that I think I only learned of it today, but there's an executive order that actually does invoke this act. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, if you saw that, go into that. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your take on it.
No, it's. I mean, first, I would love to see that companies wake up and stop having to be told to do this, and they should just
Hmm.
support the nation, and they should realize that for us to have the deterrence we need against China and Russia, we need to have best of breed technology of U.S. companies, and so that's completely insane not to do it and have to even get close to doing this stuff. Ideally, we should not have to do that.
Hmm.
But again, if we do have to do it, first, part of the that act is giving the authority of the government to say, hey, this is national security, we can seize it, effectively take property of it and give some type of compensation to the company or to the individual owning the IP. Well, first, it's open source and accessible to anybody. So what's the compensation you want to give? Well, it's probably zero because you gave it for free. So there's no compensation. So there's no cost for the taxpayer. Great. And you don't have to classify it. You can just seize it. You could, by the way, if you wanted, but you don't have to do that. And just use it. I would not let a company tell me government that I cannot use something for national security when it's literally a difference. Because by the way, that's the only model that we could even use that brings any value gap today. Nothing comes close to it. It's still kindergarten level compared to GPT-4, by the way, right?
Yeah,
which is way better.
Mistral's pretty good.
But that's an Apache license. Sure, but if you look at the benchmarks, it's still the best. So why would I not have the best when you gave it effectively away to China? Mm-hmm. The minute you open source it, you lost your credibility. I mean, the minute you gave it, the minute terrorists can take it, but not DoD. Right. I mean, what's wrong with you, right? Just don't do that, right? Or then you have to really control, right? If you really want to do something like this, then you can't just make it open for everybody and but not DoD, and just put that in the license term instead of controlling download, right? Because they're not controlling download. You can download it. China can go and download it today, and they did. Mm-hmm. So,
so do you think
mind-boggling to me, right? It just makes no sense.
No, I'm with you. I think there was some bomb throwing in your posts, but I'm with you up until the point where we kind of don't allow companies to make their own decisions for no good reason. But I think there's a decent reason. I think the better. Sorry, I'm not supposed to editorialize here, but I'm going. Okay. I was told not to. My what do you think? What are your thoughts on what are your thoughts on the DoD creating its own model, and why hasn't this happened?
I mean, look at MilCloud and look at what we did with cloud. It was a disaster, right? Everything we do in-house and creating some type of GOTS nightmare ends up a massive expense to the taxpayer, ends up 20 years behind what the commercial side is doing. I've yet to see basics succeed, let alone something that complex.
That's true.
To even get it on budget and get GPUs will take 2 years before we even get started. It makes people that say that I've never done anything in the government to believe that would even be a remotely good idea, right? That's people watching NCIS and thinking they can actually pull prints in 2 minutes, which does not exist.
There is a precedent for this, right? There's a precedent for the government being competent. I think just labeling the government as incompetent.
Maybe 50 years ago, when the partnership with FFRDCs, and if you look at during World War II, when we had momentum and we had no complacency and we were trying to get stuff done, there was great momentum with Silicon Valley and stuff. Now half of the Silicon Valley, 9/10 of the Silicon Valley forgot they were funded by the DoD and exist because of it and refuse to work with DoD. So when you're in a world where the best of breed companies refuse to engage with the department, you can't think as if it was still the case. And so you're going to end up with a defense industrial base who can't write a line of code correctly and charge a fortune to say hi, to end up building this capability in a vacuum and be 20 years too late and too little, right?
That seems...
Look at DoD Cloud, right? 10 years too late for GWCC to come out. JEDI was a debacle. They couldn't even do the contract. They couldn't even do the tech. I mean, forget about the tech, but they couldn't even do the contract right.
But that seems to be core to the issue, right? If we're even saying that the DoD can't take a known technology with proven application and at least replicate it, I think we have bigger problems than co-opting the technology.
We have way bigger problems. I mean, the fact that Sage is still not CUI authorized everywhere because of government incompetence, when we built a package that's pristine with zero finding, and I would have accredited this kind of stuff in 2 weeks, and we're 8 months in after giving the package to the government, and they still are fighting it. Meanwhile, CCP has it across Fabric, not Sage, but Beidou stuff. Right. And we're still fighting about CUI. And I put this at $30 a month, completely inexpensive. and you have airmen footing the bill with their personal credit card because they're tired of waiting for the government to pay for it.
Hmm.
And we're spending 900 billion, and we have veterans and we have war fighters living in conditions that are despicable for any human, right? I mean, I can give you 50 million examples of where the money, and we're spending 1.7 trillion with the T on F-35, right?
So I gotta say, I'm
I
gonna
have a
cut in
million of
here.
use cases that makes no
Yeah.
sense.
No, it's I hear you, and sometimes I love the bombs that you throw. But every time you throw an Ask Sage, I'm like, oh, I can't. I don't know. Are you going? What's your plan with this? Because
By the way, I only did
I love your
Ask Sage
voice.
because I
Yeah.
only did Ask Stage because I knew it would take forever to do it. I also knew that it's a two-sided sword, right? One is if I don't do it, it's going to take 10 years for someone else to show up, or someone like Palantir would do it and cost $1 million to say hi, right?
Yeah.
Which is the case.
Which is probably what
It's
they're
not
doing.
30.
Yeah.
It's not $30. I can tell you that, right? And that's fine. They bring value too, right? But don't get me wrong, it's not the same, barrier to entry, right? For mass adoption. So I wanted to solve that problem. Number one. Number two, I knew also that by being the poster child of it, it was going to create impediments. In fact, I'm actually debating right now to sell the company because I'm debating now that I have it and I built the bulk of it, if I'm not becoming the bottleneck. If the Space Force has banned generative AI, a month ago, I can tell you it's probably 99.9% because of me. And that's despicable, by the way. It's
Really?
payback and whatever. And I have the
Jeez.
proof to say that, by the way.
Jeez.
But the fact is, I'm now the impediment to the adoption of the technology that I was trying to streamline. And so at what point am I too big an impediment? At the same time, if I sell it to the wrong people, they're going to kill it or not do right to the warfighter, and you're going to end up back to zero. So what's the right path, right? And it's a debate I have right now. But I'm not about making money. I made enough money, right? I don't care. At the same time, I want to make sure it's get to the hands of the warfighter so we have a chance at winning against China. And right now, we don't.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that stage is going to solve all of it, but it will certainly accelerate a lot of it, right? Because if you look at acquisition problem, legal, all these, cyber defense, accreditation, automation, all this stuff, if you can augment velocity by 30x, at least you have a chance to compete, right?
Yeah. To be fair, and I want to just
Real
Can
quick,
I clarify something
just
really
to do
quick?
a quick time check with you,
Go for it.
Nick,
Go for it.
before we drag on too long. Are you good to keep going, or?
Yeah, I have a few more minutes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Great. Yeah, let's. Maybe we even have you back on for a part B of this episode because it's been so good. I think we're just getting into the good stuff. But I'll let Joe ask you a follow up, and then I've got a closing question for you afterwards.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to clarify. Like, I like the concept of Ask Sage. I did say I haven't used it. I haven't. I even like I want something like this to be part of what the DoD uses. I know how fast I code every day with generative AI. I know how fast it is. They need it. I love your posts when you say something that I truly believe in. The DoD needs to change in so many ways, and you have so many good ideas. When you throw an Ask Sage, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know where his equities lie at this in this
I mean,
post.
it could be a conflict
Does
of
that make
interest.
sense?
Could be like self. Yeah,
That's
I mean, I get it. And it's tough for me, right? Because I still need to speak out on these topics.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I technically now have a conflict of interest. People that know me know that I don't give a crap about the money and I don't give a crap about, any of this stuff. And so they know I will do the right thing, even if it's not the best interest of my finances. People that don't know me, they're going to be like, well, he's biased. He's pushing his own agenda. But the fact is, I created the company to begin with because of the value to the nation. I could have done something else. I could have focused on other markets. Let's face it. I made more money in banking with Sage than I did with DoD, right? By far, like 20x. So why am I wasting my time? It's not for the money. But at the same time, if I'm not vocal about some of these issues, then no one else is going to be. Because let's face it, you don't see a lot of people on LinkedIn, taking the stance I take. And most people reach out to me in private, say, oh, thank you. I can't say it, but I really appreciate you saying it. I'm like, well, maybe you can say, maybe you need to find, where your balls are, because maybe you could say it too, right? It's not just me that has to put my own career and life at risk. You can also do that, right? I'm not the only one on the planet with balls, I hope. But I'm also, I'm
Nice.
also transparent when he says, I made the money before going into the government, so that gives me the advantage not to care about money. But then people still complain. Then when I have a company that now I'm making money potentially, and now I'm conflicted. But they were fine when I was taking the risk of losing money when I was on the other side, right? So it's you can't have it both ways, right?
Yeah.
Because the same people telling me, "Oh, I can't say this because I'm going to lose my job." Well, maybe you should lose it. I don't know, but maybe you should do the right thing for the nation. I don't know.
If you're
It's
if you're
just
That's
nice
easy,
awesome.
enough,
right, for people to say, "Oh, I can't say." Why can't you? You don't have a voice. Like
yeah. If you
you can't
what
type.
I
I
find
can
is
type it for you.
I always tell my kids. By the way, I also had a pandemic baby. I know you had
Ah,
two.
yes.
But I always tell my kids it's the sandwich. You do a compliment sandwich. DoD has some great people in it. This shit is fucked up. Like, and
Yep.
then you go to yeah. So I always try and be kind about it, but I also try to be a bomb
I
thrower
think we're
thrower as
running out
much as
of
I can.
time. I think
Yeah.
kindness is
Sorry.
fine
Yeah.
for
Oh
if
wait.
people want to
Yeah.
be kind, they go to the VA or they go to I don't know, whatever agency. If you
That's
want to
valid.
get stuff done, and we're talking about fighter, there's no place for. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be an ass all the time, right? But you also want to be like, hey, this is it. Enough with the games. Let's get it done. Let's stop talking. We hear the
Yeah.
right stuff all the time, right? With the leaders talking a good game, but there's nothing getting done. In fact,
Yeah.
look at some of the people that left the department the last 2 years. It's getting worse and worse. And now they're pushing stuff like, hey, you have to be FedRAMP now for every software. You know how much that costs? What startup is going to do that? You know what kind of nonsense that is? The velocity impact, that's going to be for startups to work with DoD. That's going to kill any chance of DoD to compete if we do stuff like that. And then you have leaders saying, "Oh, it's a law. You have to do FedRAMP. It's the law." I'm like, "Okay, where is it in the law that you have to be FedRAMP? Show me the law." And then they never respond to the email because it's not a fucking law, right? And so I can give you a million examples of incompetence, right? But when you're incompetent and you're doing something like IRS, I'm fine because I don't want to pay more taxes. But when it's about war fighting stuff, you can be incompetent, right? You're putting the nation at risk. You're putting our kids at risk, and you need to wake up, And I'm not going to let you be incompetent or let get away with murder for 20 years, like we've been.
There's some issues with that statement. Meaning, like,
Yeah.
if
Well, I think
if
we
the
need to
IRS
hold
doesn't
that for
get
a follow up.
paid- Okay,
Let's do
all
a
right,
follow up
all
on
right.
that one. So we're gonna
Sounds
put a
good. John,
bow
to
on
you.
today. Got one more question for you to put a bow on it.
Yeah.
You've had some amazing experiences here. What should our audience know that they may not currently know, and what sort of like life advice takeaway do you have for the audience?
Well, certainly, I guess one of the most important skill that you need to have nowadays is to be able to self learn, and self learning is key. And if you're waiting for someone to hold your hand to go teach you something, you already missed the boat. And so the biggest skill you can get is self learning. Number one. Number two, I guess if you have to get a skill, I'll probably be prompt engineering and really embracing that before it's too late. It might already be, so you better wake up now. And then not putting your head in the sand. Too many times we see people because of their comfort level or fear, pretend something is not happening. Like you see, for example, right now with generative AI, people say, "Oh, it's going to go away, it's a fad." I'm like, no, you're going to go away. Your job is going to go away if you think that way. And so my take is, if you can't reinvent yourself because you're not passionate about, maybe it's time to become an electrician, which you could make a lot of money with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those words. We really appreciate having you on the show today. I'm going to hit
Thanks for
cut
having
on
me.
this one. I think Joe had a couple closing comments for you, maybe offline. But yeah, we really appreciate having you on the show and the awesome insights here. Thank you.
No, thank you.